All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Judiciary Committee meeting for whatever day we are in. So they all run together at this point. I think it's Wednesday, May 31st. The Republicans are in caucus, so we are going to stand in recess until the end of caucus.
At the hearing, I don't know how to tap into our caucus. I can just listen.
Senator Kissel, we can hear you.
I'm back, Kirsten.
Yes, we can hear you, Senator.
Good morning.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call back to order the Judiciary Committee meeting. We have one item on our agenda today, bill for consideration from the Senate Bill number 1067, an act concerning adequate and safe healthcare staffing. Let me make sure I get this right. The motion is a JF with recommended adoption of Senate Schedule Amendment LCO 8623. Can I have a motion, please?
Second.
I have a motion from Representative Porter and I have a second from Senator Winfield. Is there discussion on this bill? Senator Kissel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning and to everyone. So my initial question is, what area of cognizance brings this to the Judiciary Committee? Are there penalties involved here?
My understanding is there are, Senator. Turn this over to Senator Winfield with respect to specifics, but I believe our area of cognizance is the civil penalties, which begin on line 241 of the amendment. Not the underlying bill, but we should be working off of the amendment.
Okay, and could you just reiterate what those penalties are and for what behaviors so that folks on the committee can follow along? But I just want to narrow what our focus is.
I think the penalties imposed upon a hospital for failure to abide by the underlying provisions of the bill, specifically that of maintaining a hospital staffing committee, submitting a report, posting a staffing plan, submit corrective action plans, etc. The penalty is a fine of $3,500 for first violation and $5,000 for subsequent violations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, through you, regarding there's parts of this bill that have to do with how votes are taken, specifically getting over 50% of some kind of nurses versus other kinds of nurses. Do we have any cognizance over variations of what I would perceive? I think Robert's Rules of Order would fall within our bailiwick, but I'm just wondering, do we have control over that? Because that part really bothers me.
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not believe, while this building uses a set of rules of orders, not particularly Robert's, but Mace's, I don't believe that we, as a committee, govern how another organization uses Robert's rules of order. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much. And how on the fines, who imposes those fines?
Senator Winfield.
One moment, Mr. Chair, just to orient myself. It looks like it's the Commissioner of Public Health. And where I would be getting that from is you're looking at line 236 and 237 and talking about what the Commissioner of Public Health is ordering. That brings you down to B in 241, which is the imposition of the civil penalty. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you. So there's a hospital up in our neck of the woods. My friend and colleague, Representative Hall, is there on the committee as well. And that's Johnson Memorial Hospital. And while technically they're based out of Stafford, up on the mountain up here, they have a lot of ancillary facilities right here in Enfield. And so let's say they neglect, let's say this bill passes and they neglect to post some sort of staffing announcement that is required by this bill. How does that violation come to the attention of the Department of Public Health?
Senator Winfield.
That is a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure how the violation comes to the attention of the department. what I can tell you is what the bill suggests when that has happened, through you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kissel.
And through you, let's say I'm an interested nurse. Let's say that that's what the goal is here, to have certain nurses get empowered so that they feel that they have appropriate staffing at whatever facilities at work here. Is there anything in the bill that says who a notice of violation should be given to in the Department of Public Health?
Senator Winfield.
In the section that we're talking about, I don't see that, that it has a specific recipient. I do see that the actor here is the Commissioner of Public Health. And so my assumption based on the construct here is that however it is initially received, the issue has to rise to the level of the commissioner in order for the action to have taken place through you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kissel.
And so through you, Chairman Staffstrom, would the best advice we could give should this bill pass would be if an employee feels that procedures weren't followed, or any interested party, that until regulations are promulgated, I would guess, sending a certified letter to the Commissioner of Public Health would be the best way to go?
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would say that I would not go as far as to say that. I think, again, this is a bill that's in its complete cognizance is the cognizance of a different committee. And that conversation may have actually happened in the committee. And also that these bills have to, should it pass here today, get back to the floor of the Senate and then the House. So I think that those conversations can be asked or had with those whose cognizance it is, as you know. And we have different committees that touch on a piece of the bill, but clearly we weren't part of the public hearing and the discussions around the bill. And so every question as it pertains to the bill, we will not be able to answer, but those questions are completely appropriate, should we get there, to ask of the chair who has cognizance over the bill in its entirety, through you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kissel.
Well, thank you. Through you, thank you, Chairman Winfield. Well, through you, a follow-up. Well, I appreciate that. I guess my view is that we're limited to the four corners of the bill and its language, and those questions on the floor of the House or Senate will be appropriate. But, you know, if I'm out in the field at one of these facilities, I'm, you know, a medical provider, a nurse, I'm not going to know what that conversation's about. I'm just going to get a heads up, maybe an outline as to what the rules are. And so I guess we're going to leave it on their own until regulations are promulgated. Another question through you is the fine limits. Is the wording up to, so that there's latitude on the part of the commissioner, or is it a mandatory, you know, $3,500 for the first offense, thing like that?
Senator Winfield.
I read it as imposes the civil penalty of, not up to, for the $3,500 in line 241, through you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much. And so just, you know, in relation to a lot of our other laws, be they criminal or civil, I'm just going to use by comparison. A lot of times we'll get bills referred to us that start in labor, and they have up to, and that's an important consideration, because then at least we have to trust, you know, right now it's Dante Bartolomeo, whom was a Senate colleague I have the utmost confidence in. I'm not that familiar with the Commissioner of Public Health at this point in time, and the fact that this bill ties him or her hands by saying it has to be $3,500. Another question, you know, within, I think, our bailiwick, since we're focused on the penalty, is there a due process? In other words, if this notice goes to the Department of Public Health, do they notify hospital executives or someone else to have a hearing on whether, you know, maybe they didn't look at the right bulletin board for the posting, and it's really on the bulletin board in hallway A, not hallway B, so that this is a substantial, $3,500 is not insubstantial. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for the hospital administration to present its side of the case.
Senator Winfield.
If you give me a moment. So, if the hospital is in receipt of an order pursuant to the section of the bill we're talking about, they can request a hearing. I believe it's 5 business days. And that's in section P of the bill, which is lines 244 through 252.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much. And through you, Chairman Staffstrom, does it stay, let's say I'm the hospital, I get the notice, I immediately that day send out an appeal because I want a hearing, because again, it was posted on the bulletin board, they just didn't see it. Does it say how that hearing takes place, or is it just sort of generic, says there's going to be a hearing?
Senator Winfield.
In that section, the hospital that submitted the request for the hearing to contest the order it just talks about the submission of the request, and after the request, if it's timely, the department setting it down for a hearing. So that's all that's in that section, Senator.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much. And a lot of these hospitals, in fact, I believe, in my example, Johnson Memorial, which is the hospital itself is based in Stafford, the town adjacent to Summers, up here in North Central Connecticut. But it's my understanding that recently they were acquired by Trinity, so that Trinity is the umbrella corporation. I'm not even sure where Trinity is based out of. I think they own hospitals all over the country. I'm not exactly sure. So when the department sends out these notices, do they send it to the hospital itself, or do they send it to the corporate executives of the umbrella corporation if it's owned by a larger group or principal party or something like that?
Senator Winfield.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is not a subject matter that is directly in our cognizance, so my knowledge on this is more limited than some of the things we deal with directly in this committee. I think, though, the bill talks about the hospital, and so I would assume that it's not what you might call the headquarters, but again, in an attempt to make sure that we have adequate staffing and that we are safe, there is a conversation that I hope we get to have and do not take way too long in this committee to talk about, so that we could have get there, and those questions would be really great questions to ask at that point.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would beg, I know these are nettlesome questions, but it's sort of really exactly what the Judiciary Committee should be all about. I think, I'm not trying to figure out about staffing levels and stuff like that, but I think that procedure, due process, fairness in a sort of a litigious kind of situation, whether it's civil or criminal, falls directly in our lap, and that's what we should be concerned with. On the penalty, since it's a mandatory penalty and there's no latitude, do we know if there was a comparison? And again, I use by reference the Department of Labor, because it's not unusual for the Department of Labor bills to come before us for penalty review, or even for that matter, deep. So I'm just wondering, since we don't have a lot of public health bills, what did they use to come up with the $3,500? Is this something done in other states? How do I know that that's reasonable or not, or just not outrageous? Because, failing to post something seems easily remedied. You could have it on a website as opposed to on a bulletin board. And if the commissioner has no latitude and they find, well, you had it on the wrong bulletin board or something like that. Again, $3,500 seems to me a lot of money. And I just want to know if there's some comparison that took place that, Oh, that's actually low if you look at hospitals across the country. I don't know that. So I'm just trying to, as a Judiciary Committee member, determine if that's within the realm of fairness or if it's just off the charts in one area or another. Maybe it's outrageously low. I don't know.
Senator Kissel, I think certainly setting a fine, particularly a fine of this magnitude, would be within our cognizance. I would submit to you that it is not uncommon, particularly when we're talking about a business entity and entities as large as a hospital, to set fines that are in the four figures, as these fines are.
So thank you for that elucidation. So it's my understanding that based upon your experience, Mr. Chair, that a fine in the thousands is in the neighborhood, maybe large to an individual, but we want to catch the attention of a corporate entity to make sure that they follow rules and regulations. Is that my understanding?
Senator, in addition, I'd also point out, we're not talking about a per day fine. As I read this language, it is a $3,500 one-time fine for the violation. It is not. Sometimes we say fines that are $100 a day or $500 a day or the like. That is not the situation here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And regarding the fine, let's say the fine is imposed, it's $3,500 for the posting of the information regarding staffing on the wrong bulletin board. Is there a right for the corporate entity or the hospital itself to appeal?
Senator Winfield.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I said in lines 244 through 252, there's the ability to avail one organizationally oneself of the hearing process that is built into the bill. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Winfield, I'd also add, I believe the reference to chapter 54 is
Yeah.
to the Administrative Procedures Act. So this is.
And that, yes, and that's incorporated into those lines for Senator Kissel in case he doesn't have the bill.
Senator Kissel, further questions?
Thank you. Just one more, and because I know others on in the committee, I'm sure have some questions as well. But again, just so I know the universe that we're talking about, again, within our cognizance, what would constitute a potential violation that would engender a potential $3,500 fine?
Can you, Senator, I believe that's been asked and answered, no?
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I think Senator Winfield sort of went through a
It's not
list
a
of.
problem. I'm happy to answer the question.
Senator Winfield.
Violations of failure by the hospital to establish or maintain the staffing committee that's required by the bill, to submit the reports required, to post a staffing plan, to comply with 80% nursing assignments. So it is the things that are laid out in lines 231, going down until we get to approximately line 240, where it talks about the fine itself.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And again, just one last point to clarify. And so that $3,500 fine would be the same for a violation of any of those provisions. And again, it's and I thank Senator Staffstrom, Chairman Staffstrom, for making it clear that this is a one-time fine. So for any of those violations, it's $3,500. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Senator.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions for this morning. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions or comments on the bill? Further questions or comments on the bill? Representative Fishman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, looking at the totality of the bill, I think in order to evaluate the fine, I'm looking at what individuals would be fined for, and this concept of hospital staffing committees. I just had some questions.
Do the best we can, Representative.
Sure. Thank you. In line 27, we add to, or the proposed bill adds to existing language an adjective. Presently, the law says hospital staffing. And the drafters chose to add the word dedicated. Now, I believe the addition of such an adjective would be required to have some sort of definition. So how does adding dedicated to line 27 change the existing law through you?
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this bill is not directly in our cognizance, so I was not a part of the conversation about the bill. And dedicated or dedicated hospital staffing committee don't appear in the definitions in the bill. And so when that happens, generally how it is understood is that the additional language takes on its general definitional meaning. And so my belief in reading this is that as opposed to establishing a committee that will be looking at this, is that it won't be combined with other committees to do several types of work. It will be dedicated. I know you're not supposed to use the word in defining, but it will be dedicated or have as its job to look at this particular issue through you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, I guess the concern, and I appreciate the answer. I guess the concern is further on in the bill, it requires the management to provide that the individuals can do their work on this staffing committee. So now if we say one is a dedicated, it leads me to believe that they are no longer rendering medical care as a nurse. They are now dedicated to this process. That's a significant concern. But then looking down in that same section, it requires, and this specifically,
I'm not sure which section you're in.
Senator Winfield.
You said looking down and just help me know where you are.
Sure, no problem at all, because I had referenced line 27
okay.
previously. So, but that's fine. I mean, so we're in section 1,
Okay.
particularly sub little c.
Okay.
In line 40, it requires the hospital staffing committee to include broad-based representation. But then I look further on in line 48 and 49, where it requires that individuals that are part of this group be selected through an election. So how do we put together an election and making sure there's broad-based representation? Which would prevail for you?
I'm not actually sure I understand what exactly you're asking, but let me just take a crack at the things you said. Dedicated, taken away from doing anything else, I don't think is necessarily the case. The committee's work is dedicated to a thing. The individual who's part of the committee is, my understanding, not necessarily dedicated only to doing that committee. So when they're doing the work of the committee, it would be not combined with the other committees like I suggested, but I don't think it's necessarily the case that the individual is taking away from anything. On the issue of voting and how that's established, I think that's a little beyond what we do here in this committee. I would assume that came up in conversation. I also assume that at some point in the future, should we get there, the rules of that would be established and clear for those who are part of the process to understand through you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the concern, well, I know the concern is that we are requiring this broad-based representation and yet also mandating an election. And then at the end, fining someone if this process is not followed. And I think it has to be clear which one it is. It clearly says broad-based representation across hospital services. So if certain individuals that render certain services within the hospital are all elected through their peers, that isn't broad-based representation. So, but I move on. Well, although was there a response or?
It's up to you whether you want a response or not.
I certainly, I think for the purposes of talking about this bill, if there's more information with regard to that, I think I would find that to be helpful.
This is talking where you are in the bill, I believe, actually begins on line 47 at the middle of the line. It's talking about the direct care registered nurses who are not members of a collective bargaining unit shall be that. So as I read that, we are talking about two things, as you suggest. We're talking about broad-based representation, but per a unit, which is what I think lines 47 through 49 is talking about. The way the representation of that particular unit would happen is through an election. So you can have both at the same time. Do you, Mr. Chair?
Representative Fishbein.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I guess in a perfect world, you could, but you know, this is where giving the guide rails, but looking to line 52, we are through this legislation, the proponents are mandating that the individuals on the staffing committee get paid, including differentials, and I'm particularly at line 51, 52, on the committee, and consider to the extent possible the time such employees serves on the committee as part of their regularly scheduled work week. So I thought I heard before that we weren't taking people away from care. Could you please explain how, if it's mandated to be part of their work week, why we aren't taking people away from care through you?
Representative Fishbein, we seem to be getting beyond our cognizance here, right, which is the fine involved.
Sure, and underlying the fine though is the activity. So they would potentially be fined.
Representative, I have to interrupt. Unfortunately, the House has just gavelled in. So we are adjourned.